Okay, welcome everyone back from the break. I think a few people are probably still getting their coffees. Hi, my name's Andy Randall. I'm a product manager at Microsoft. I work on Linux strategy, cloud native things within the Azure organization. And today we're going to talk about the Kubernetes user experience. So what do we mean by user experience? Well, I did what everyone does who's working on a presentation and went to Wikipedia, and it tells me user experience is how a user interacts with and experiences a product, system, or service. Includes a person's perceptions of utility, ease of use, and efficiency. So this is what we're going to be thinking about, and particularly, I'm actually not so interested, I suspect, in most of your experiences, because I'm guessing that most of you are already fairly familiar with Kubernetes and probably have got used to its quirks and are probably kind of beyond some of the initial learning curve. One of the things that really interests me is that getting started user and how do they approach it. So what does that actually look like? So is there somewhere I go just to go install Kubernetes to try it out? Well, there's no apt-get Kubernetes. If I try brew install Kubernetes, it doesn't work. I tried it. If I go to an app store, search for Kubernetes, there's Kubernetes related to apps, but where do I actually go? So it's obvious that even as a new user, it's not quite clear how do I get started using Kubernetes. And if you don't like memes and presentations, I suggest you leave now. Because I got this one this morning. This was quite nice. Imagine you are Luke Skywalker, and you are up for adventure and excitement. You want to try out Kubernetes. If you meet we're probably mostly the Han Solos here. The wisdom coming in, saying, "Yeah, may the force be with you." But the obvious starting place: go to the documentation. I'm going to understand the concepts of Kubernetes. I've got various options for trying it. Do I want to go try Kubernetes, or do I want to set up a cluster, or do I want to learn how to use it? I don't really know. Actually, this isn't a dig at the docs. The docs are actually great. There's a lot of really, really good stuff in there. But there's just a lot of different options, and they're really trying to distill this down. But when I dig into it, I go into the getting started. It's going to tell me I can download Kubernetes, but OK, I want to learn. I pretty quickly find out the best way to learn is to go install Minikube, and that takes me off to the Minikube docs. Already as a user, I'm like, you've just jumped me out of the docs I was reading into some other doc site, but fine, whatever. Installation, I jump to that. Whoa, hold on. There's a prereq here, which is container or virtual machine manager needed on my machine, like Docker or Podman. I don't know what these things are, but maybe I can get Docker desktop or something, but whatever. Particularly for Macs, this can be a bit tricky, but assume I've managed to work out how to get that prereq sorted, and I managed to install Minikube. I can do Minikube start, and I've got a cluster running. So I can now do the magic kubectl get pods. Well, I can if I've remembered that I have to install kubectl, which doesn't tell me here anywhere, but we're assuming the new user has worked that out. And now I can start Minikube dashboard. That sounds pretty promising, right? If I'm a new user, I want to try something visual. And I do get something pretty quickly that allows me to visualize the cluster. So let me just open this up in a browser. So it's going to look something like this. Actually, fairly nice, clean, simple UI. It's been part of Kubernetes since 2015. So this has been around nearly as long as Kubernetes itself. It's been through a couple of iterations since then. And it's great from some perspective. So it supports all of the Kubernetes resources. But it's also pretty simple. It's very fixed. Like the navigation there is quite intimidating. It has a lot of things on, and there's no kind of hierarchy of levels. It runs just in one cluster. It only runs in the browser and running in that cluster, so there's no concept of viewing multiple clusters. And it's pretty much read-only apart from that little plus button where you can apply a YAML, and as a new user, like applying a new YAML is fairly intimidating. It's also not really expandable. If I want to add things to this, I need to go get involved in the upstream dashboard project and make PRs and all of that. So, so that's what we see with dashboard. But suppose we've worked out what Kubernetes looks like. Now I can start to create some applications. OK, how do I do that? Well, I'm back at the command line again, if I'm following most of these instructions. So in the command line, I'm now back to kubectl. So I'm out of the graphical environment already. And now I've got to worry about port forwarding. OK, that's maybe slightly complicated, but it tells me what to do. I've got an application created. So this is really all you have to do, right? All you have to do, install Kubernetes with kubeadm or minikube or something else. Install kubectl locally, if you remember to do that. Set up a kube config. We skipped over that. Enable the dashboard. Apply some random YAML file that someone shared with you. And now you're ready to start learning Kubernetes. Or at least you're ready to start learning Kubernetes security. Because if you've just deployed the dashboard, now you've potentially created a vulnerability. Yeah, maybe by default these days that vulnerability is plugged, but you're going to be worrying about this. And you're going to start to have to think about service accounts and role-based access and all of these wonderful things. This all starts to get pretty intimidating fairly quickly. And we've only talked about Kubernetes at this point. There's a broader ecosystem of cloud native. What is the cloud native user experience? The CNCF user experience within that? Well, I've been around in the game long enough to remember when this came out in 2018. And I love this quote, right? We thought we could produce a trail map that would help users select their stack. It's a suggested path for companies that want to modernize their infrastructure. Nobody's using all 16 CNCF projects as part of their enterprise computing stack. Right? We needed to help people choose among those 16. Well, we all know what happened since then. This is pretty intimidating, right? There's so many tools out there. I did warn you about the memes. It has become a meme, right? And OK, maybe it's become more than one meme. And multiple. This is my favorite, the Minecraft one. Pick and mix. I love that one. So, it's a joke. We all laugh about it. But there's a lot of great things about having this rich, diverse ecosystem. Choice is good. This is what we come to this ecosystem for, is because we have this choice, because we have this flexibility. Every user is going to have slightly different requirements. And that's a great thing. And there's actually, before everything I'm about to go on to say, I do want to point out there is a lot of consistency that's there for users when they're picking up these projects. None of it's enforced, but just through kind of how the community has built things. A lot of projects use CRDs for storing their configuration in the cluster. YAML is a standard language for configuring them. A lot of projects have controllers that you can deploy into your cluster. Helm charts are a fairly standard way of installing things. So this is actually reasonably consistent when you think about it from a new user's perspective. But when you think about the user experience of each project, they are inevitably standalone. So whether that's a UI or CLI, they'll all have their own quirks, their own syntax, their own graphical presentation. And this is good for a lot of good reasons, right? They need to have, there are certain things that they're going to do which are specialized. That project should focus on that. They want independence, they want autonomy from the rest of the ecosystem, so they can innovate as fast as possible. And there are going to be customization things that they're going to want to do independent from other projects. So this is good. This makes sense. But it comes with a lot of challenges, right? That learning curve. You imagine that Luke Skywalker. I don't know if he's going to keep going once he sees the set of choices that's ahead of him. Certainly not on his own. There's a lot of things to learn. It's time-consuming. It's not novice-friendly. And even if you are an expert, you're still going to end up doing a lot of context switching. You've got a web UI for this, another web UI for that, and that's a productivity impact. And you're going to have inconsistency. So when you do that context switch, you're going to have to remember, oh, I'm in this tool. It goes noun, verb, not verb, noun, or whatever it is. Right? So all of these things are challenges, and you end up looking like John Travolta here, like, yeah, what am I doing here? Now, one solution here may be to say, well, I throw it all in, throw the towel in, and I'm going to go to my favorite vendor, and there are managed services, and don't they solve all of this? And in fact, I work for Microsoft. I would very much encourage you to go use AKS. It's great. But at the same time, this is true, but as a community, can't we build a better experience that's vendor agnostic, easy to use, that helps people get started and operationalize cloud-native tools out of the box? So that's been part of what we're trying to do with the Headlamp project. It's a modern UI primarily focused around Kubernetes. It's 100% open source. It's hosted in the CNCF, so it's vendor agnostic. It solves the multiple cluster problem, so you have multiple clusters that you can easily navigate between. It supports pretty much all of the Kubernetes distros you could imagine. Here, you can see all the ones that are just running under this instance, but anything that's CNCF certified Kubernetes it's going to work with. It's also available not just as a web app like Dashboard, but also as an installable application. And there are other installable applications, but they tend to be commercial. This is purely free, community-based, and open source. There's no commercialization kind of option around this. We're really trying to make the best we can in the community project. The really nice thing, we're going to dig into this more about Headlamp, is it is extensible. So we're going to talk about how the plugins work. So the vision here, what we're trying to build is, it's a unified experience that's accessible for everyone to both learn, with a lot of emphasis on learning, to make it easy for the novices, but also operating to simplify that user experience where you have multiple projects deployed for the whole ecosystem of CNCF tools. Now, when you think about the size of the ecosystem, this is going to be a forever project. This is not something we're ever going to say is done. But as a vision and a guide to where we're going, I think this is a nice way of thinking about what we're trying to do with the Headlamp project. So what makes it easy? First of all, just getting started. That whole experience that I went through up front of reading the docs, if you go and look at the Headlamp docs, pretty much any way you want to deploy an app that's whatever you're used to, you'll be able to do that with Headlamp, whether that's as a Helm chart deploying into an existing Kubernetes cluster, or as an application deployed as a Flatpak or via Brew, or just drag and drop into your applications folder on your Mac. We also want to make it easy to get started with Kubernetes itself, right? So obviously, this is in the case where you're deploying an application, because if you're deploying into a cluster, you've already got it deployed. But if you're just deploying the desktop application, we've actually integrated with Minikube. So this is still work in progress, but we've integrated with Minikube, so the application behind the scenes will start the cluster and everything you need, and you just press the Give Me a New Cluster button. So think about that new user experience. I've installed an application. I've pressed Create Cluster. I'm there. That's it. Done. We've also built in an app catalog integrated into the Artifact Hub, the CNCF Artifact Hub, which has a whole bunch of Helm charts, and present those Helm charts in the application. You can see, there's an install button. You just press the install button, it installs it. So let's take a quick look. See how this looks. So here's my home tab. It shows all my clusters. You can see at the moment I only have one, this one called KCD demo. I can go in there, I can look at my namespaces, I can dig into workloads, I can look at pods, go into the pod, I can see what memory that pod's using up. I can exec straight into that pod, so it gives me a prompt straight on the pod. I can show the logs from the pod. It's kind of everything you would want to do, and down through all of these various options. Now let's try going back to the home, and I'll do the add cluster. I'll create a new cluster. Thank you, Margot. Let's do that. Of course, being a modern UI, it has light and dark mode. Thank you, yeah. Okay, all right. So let's give it a new cluster name, KCD demo test 1. I am very creative. Okay, let's see if this works. Fingers crossed. I did say this is work in progress. Okay, so this is going. You can see it creating the Minikube cluster, pulling up the output of Minikube. It's pulling Docker in the background. Hopefully, it won't take too long. Booting up control plane is promising. Okay, I am done. I have a new cluster. Thank you. And there it is. Okay, now let's have you see, I'm not getting the same charts that I had up the top here. There's a little information there. Metric server, right? So we actually use metric server to pull the data. A default Minikube cluster doesn't have metric server. But I have an app store. What was it called? Metric server? That's what you say? Okay, let's install that then. This is the YAML for it. I can edit it. I'm going to give it a select the latest version, put it into the default namespace. You can see how bad I type. Okay, install that. Okay, it's applying it, and it's created. And now if I go back to my workloads, boom, now my charts are showing. I mean, this is a kind of experience that, as a user, you kind of think this is how it should work. But I can tell you, as a new user to Kubernetes today, that's not the kind of experience you get. So I'm pretty excited about what we can do here with Headlamp. So here's some videos of there's some additional plugins that people have created. So here's one for Flux UI, and I'm sorry I can't put these in light mode. So these are video recordings just to walk through. So I don't know if any of you know this chap Laszlo at Gimlet.io. So we chatted with him, and they're working on Flux UIs, and we said, hey, what would it take just to build a Flux UI into Headlamp? He said, it could be really hard. He went away, looked at the docs, built a plugin, came back a few days later, and basically built this Flux UI. It's a proof of concept at this point. There's a lot more visualization we want to do. But you can see, rather than just presenting the CRDs as kind of uninterpreted, it's actually, because it has knowledge of Flux, it can read those CRDs and present the Git repositories that are being represented behind it. And there's a lot more we can do here. We're pretty excited about this. We also have a project called Inspector Gadget, which has a whole load of low-level eBPF tools. And you can see a bunch of them here. So let's just pick one and pick a node to run it on, play it. So this is the socket tool. It just records all the open sockets and can tell us information about those. And the cool thing here is this is all done generically. So the gadgets that are in the Inspector Gadget framework just report how they work, and then the UI for it is automatically presented. So we can do the same thing for TCP round trip time, run that on a node, and get a histogram of what the round trip time on nodes looks like. You can see there's a lot more we can do here. This is still pretty early work in progress with what we can do with Inspector Gadget, and more tightly integrating it into, say, the pods view or the node view. We can actually get even better and more exciting visualizations. Another thing we've done as a plugin is a compose plugin. So if you're familiar with Docker Compose, but you want to translate it into the Kubernetes YAML, you don't have to go out and learn that tool. It's just there, right there as a plugin in the UI. And of course, we work for Microsoft, so we built an AI plugin. But it's actually pretty cool. How can I fix the warnings in this cluster? It just tells me, okay, it sees the warnings, tells you what's up. You can go and ask it any other questions about the cluster and interact right there within this UI. You imagine for a new user asking it to explain things. This is pretty powerful. But part of my reason for being here is that we think this is going to take a village, right? As the old saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child. It's going to take a village. It's going to take everyone's efforts to really realize that vision of Headlamp being the one unified, accessible UI for all of these CNCF tools. And with that in mind, I wanted to just share some of the pointers to, if you want to go build your own plugin, what do you have to go do? So, first of all, I'm not a front-end guy, so most of this is not too meaningful to me. I know I've heard of React, I've heard of Material UI, but if you are a front-end developer and can do JavaScript and all that, it's all the APIs are there, and there's a bunch of examples that you can build on as well. So, hopefully this will inspire you if you have that kind of interest to go and look at those and build something. We actually have a VS Code extension as well, which you can find in the Visual Studio Marketplace. Just put in Headlamp there, and you get that, and it makes it aware of all the API calls and things that you can actually access from within the plugin. And there's all sorts of things that you can do from within that plugin. Things like changing any of the appearance. So you saw, in fact, on the Headlamp logo is actually changed, so you can just put your own logo in super easily, through to really completely changing the look and feel of it. Also, if you do build a plugin that's now a type on Artifact Hub is a Headlamp plugin, so you can actually publish as a Headlamp plugin type into Artifact Hub. And not only does it allow people to find it on Artifact Hub, but we're going to be building an explorer a bit like the app UI that I showed earlier, which showed the Helm charts for plugins, so users can actually explore from within Headlamp and deploy their plugins from there. So that's going to be pretty cool. And I just wanted to wrap up here with an example of a company that's really kind of embraced Headlamp and built a portal. This is actually open source, so you can go check this out. EPAM is a name, and so this is a application delivery pipeline management tool, and all of this UI that you see here, which is all completely custom to their application, is all built as a plugin in Headlamp. So you get the ability to create new components, to look at their environment, look at pipelines, all of that, all within this tool. So there's, I think, a lot of opportunity here for people to build custom portals, as well as something kind of the horizontal application of integrating all of the different CNCF tools, kind of the vertical specific application within a particular organization or enterprise to build your own portal. We're actually one of the teams in Microsoft that makes AKS accessible internally has their portal built on Headlamp. So most internal Microsoft application users will be accessing AKS through Headlamp, which is pretty cool. So that is a bit of a whistle-stop tour of what we're thinking about user experience in Kubernetes today, where it's come from, how we can make it a whole lot easier, and both for novices, but hopefully you see that even as an experienced user, as you presumably all are, that this brings some value to you as well. A lot of ways getting in touch with the team. Go try out, maybe jumping to building a plugin may not be the first step. Try it out. Give us some feedback. There's also things like language translations. So a couple of us we did German, we've got Spanish, I think we've got Portuguese. There's a bunch of existing language translations. If you know a language that's not there, please add it. Spread the word, give us a star on GitHub, and all of those things. So with that, I'm going to wrap up, and I think I've got a couple of minutes left for questions. There's a question here in the front.
Yeah, so thank you for the awesome talk. I never heard of Headlamp before, and this looks really, really cool. But my question would be, how do you intend to stay free and open source? Because like the last experience I had with a Kubernetes UI was with Lens, and that didn't work out so well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, so we started developing Headlamp. So I was part of a company called Kinvolk based in Berlin, and we got acquired by Microsoft. And so when we started developing it, we were a little startup, and a lot of startups are challenged with how do they justify their open source business business model. One of the nice things about now being part of Microsoft is, the business rationale for a project like this is very different from if you're actually trying to monetize it directly. If we make cloud native easier, if we make it easier for people to use Kubernetes, we think AKS is great. We think this is a great way for people to use AKS and get better value out of it. I only have to show that people are having a slightly better time on AKS to justify us doing this. And the other thing is, with it being in CNCF, right? The one you mentioned was never in CNCF. It has independent governance, so there's a kind of a guarantee and a commitment that comes from that as well. So I can definitely assure you, from our team's perspective, this is, very much our intention to make it a community-driven project.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to ask about access control. Is this something that we can build maybe for a group of people who wants to control other groups of people who can install specific applications or something like that? Is something we can do with this?
Good question. So the way it works now is basically it has a context which is the user's identity, right? And so it can do whatever the user can do. So it's not like dashboard where it has a service account and it actually has a whole bunch of permissions that you get independent of the user who's running it right now, which can create some kind of dissonance. There are multiple levels of that. Like, you're basically just managing Kubernetes RBAC, and the user gets whatever permissions it has as a user of Kubernetes. And in fact, if you can't do things, those buttons just disappear. So the UI is dynamic. You don't see stuff you can't do. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.